So, Chris, you've worked with both Keith Moon and John Bonham. How would you compare them as drummers?
Keith was an animal on the drums. Keith was an animal on the drums. He was wonderful. He just went crazy. I mean, he was, like this. Well, Mooney, where Bonham was playing outrageous music, rock and roll, but when, and if you might not realize that he is so measured, so in control, like so good, right? I mean, that was the difference. I mean, Mooney didn't even use a hi-hat, there was no use to him. He had more important things to do. He was they threw away the mold when they invented him,
Yeah, for sure. So this is a subjective question, but in your view, who was the better performer, Keith Moon or John Bonham?
Performer is the catchword. Well, Keith Moon was a performer. Bonham was the drummer. First and foremost. Maybe he was a drummer first and a performer second, whereas Mooney was a performer first and a drummer second.
But would you say they were equally talented on the drums, or what were your view on their abilities?
Let's put it this way. Mooney was an integral part of the Who sound, and Bonham was an integral part of the Zeppelin sound, right? And on records, you can't see them. You can only judge by what they play, right? So when it came down to putting on a record, Mooney was good enough to go on record, right? And Bonham was definitely good enough to go on record, I mean, it's just sort of a trick question, isn't it, in a way? Yeah, one was a performer playing drums, and one was a drummer performing.
That's a very interesting way of looking at things. I've never thought of it like that.
I hadn't, so you asked me, but I mean, you asked me the difference, and I think that's what the difference was, a performer playing drums and a drummer playing and performing, right? Mooney was he was just crazy, and it worked. They worked around him, it's what they were like, and Led Zeppelin were the same, but Led Zeppelin was a whole different kettle of fish. They were more measured, they were tighter, right? It didn't mean that the Who went great. It didn't mean that Led Zeppelin wasn't great because they weren't the Who. I mean, they were both great, and they were both stood beside each other and had hits, But you asked me which was the performer, and definitely Mooney, How many drummers do you know that would drive a Rolls Royce into a swimming pool, There's a performance for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what was it like from a technical perspective recording them on drums?
Well, the funny thing is, when I recorded Mooney, I only used one overhead, a Norman 47, the big old one. And I used one overhead, one snare drum, and one kick drum mic.
And what about for Bonham?
Bonham, I used 4 mics, 2 KM84s, SM57 Shure on snare drum, and then I had a ribbon microphone, RCA ribbon microphone about 30 inches in front of the kick drum, because the kick drum sound is so fantastic. I didn't want to put a mic too close, because when you're standing away from it, it sounds good. It's not going to sound the same when you get close, you see. It needed some air. So I put a ribbon microphone, which is perfect. Bonham is such a great drummer, very measured. When you're recording, many times, if you don't have a balanced drummer, it's very hard, But he was so balanced in his playing that I only had 2 overhead mics, the kick and the snare. That's all I had, It was very simple, because that's what I used when I used to do the big bands, the big sessions for Atlantic. Very minimal, because the drummers are so good. You just what they play, you hear.
Yeah.
You don't have to reach for it. They know, and Bonham was like that. It was fantastic.
When did you realize that John Bonham was such a good drummer?
Oh, it doesn't take long, because when a group starts to play and you're recording, you have to get up to speed fast, because you want to capture everything, You know, there were times when multi-track recording came in later, where people would spend 4 or 5 hours getting a drum sound, with a million microphones. I never did that, I mean, I got the sound, and I usually have a stereo mix I put on 2 tracks on the 24 track, and I have it separated, but I'd have a stereo mix to work with, which you could throw it very easily, left and right, and it was there. And if it was right, it stuck through the mix no matter what you did. You get used to doing that. But with Bonham, we were only doing 16 tracks, so I didn't have that liberty. I just was able to record them the way I did, And the fact that he, it was so measured, I mean, I didn't have to go out and stick another mic on a tom because he wasn't hitting it hard enough, And that's a joy,
Yeah. I was a little surprised when you mentioned that you used more mics to record Keith Moon than John Bonham, considering, in your words, you felt that John was the more measured of the two drummers. I would have thought perhaps that since John was more measured, you would have needed less mics to get a good recording of his drums, as opposed to Keith Moon, who was more out there.
I didn't use it for that reason. We had a place in Talent Masters in the studio where the drummer sat, and we had the microphones already set up. You set up your drums, you play, we record it, and that's it. Recording has changed. When multi-track recording, here's a little thing. When multi-track recording came of age, sort of thing happened. All of a sudden, we were able to put things on separate tracks, take more time, invent things. And for a long while, the act of recording was almost more important than the music. Because when you spend 4 hours getting a drum sound, right, at the expense of all the musicians in the studio waiting to record, when you think about it, it's pretty crazy, So, I never agreed with that, I never agreed with that. I thought when the musicians come in, your job, most as an engineer and a producer, is, to use the studio as a vehicle to get the best out of them. How can you get the best out of them if they're coming in ready to work and it's going to take 4 hours to get a drum sound, or 3 hours, or even 2 hours, Now you've got Pro Tools. You can put every mic on a separate track and worry about it 10 years from now, Then back then, you have to capture the performance. It was all about the performance.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what you see, make sure to subscribe for more. All the videos on this channel are original. I'm the one conducting all the interviews and editing all the videos together. So if you guys like what you see and you want to support, the best way to do so is honestly just to subscribe. Lots more to come.